as the world, I was going to say turns, some might say as the world burns, the smoke outside is unbelievable. And, where they say there's smoke, there's fire. Well, considering the news we got with the PGA and Live Golf now holding hands, which this is just the start of the fireworks, folks. I mean, this is so heavily layered. There's really not a simple answer for what is going to be sort of an umbrella group. But man, oh man, there are some emotions and some feelings, which I understand. I completely understand. Will the business model eventually end up being better for golf? So there's two things the way you got to look at this. There's the one that is the sort of the road that has morals and ethics, and we all know how that's a short road, folks. Just so you know, that's a road less traveled. But there are some real issues with that. And then there's the business side. And if they're unified, which is really kind of interesting because Liv was the one that was pointing their fingers at the PGA saying, that's a monopoly. That's collusion. That's a monopoly. But now they're actually all together. Somehow that talk has stopped. Isn't that interesting? So you have that going on. Then you have the draft coming up. And you look at each individual team. And of course, in this particular area, we're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs. And you're like, drafting? Oh, that's right. So who's playing? Who's staying? Who's not signing? Who's signing? Is it the same coach? Are they the same players? This new general manager, a lot of heat about that. Look at the trades he makes. He's terrible. No wonder there's smoke all over this world because there is a fire. And now we go to our good friend, Coach Frank. How you doing, buddy?
Any better, I'd be you, Mike.
Well, it is absolutely the weirdest world that we live in. There is nothing that is straightforward, and I mean nothing. And as much turmoil as that we've seen as Leaf fans, well, now you're kind of in it a little bit. I mean, and careful what you wish for. If you didn't want Dubas, Dubas no longer here now with the Pittsburgh Penguins. You've got Jim Treliving, and you see all kinds of things written about him. Some I agree with, and some I absolutely don't. There's a little bit of hate out for this guy, and that to me is more a fan perspective than it is the actual workings of what happens with an NHL team. I happen to think that he's a good hockey man. He also is an ethical guy as far as sports go, and I think he could be strong. I just don't know if he's going to have that kind of autonomy because as the layers are pulled back, Frank, are we seeing maybe what was behind closed doors with the Shanna plan, maybe not as harmonious maybe as we may have thought?
Wow, Mike, I've tried to dissect this how many ways and try to understand. And I think at the end of the day, my conclusion is this ball was dropped by both sides. You can't really point the finger at one specific person, whether it's Shanahan, whether it's Dubas, whether it was the board. If you really wanted him back, he should have been extended last year, right? You don't go into a season with a lame duck coach or the GM. You just don't. But they made their decision. Fast forward, this is what you deal with, right? You kind of play with fire and you get burnt, and that's what happened. On the Dubas side, again, we can speculate. I firmly believe, like, there were rumors out in March that Pittsburgh, we're kind of looking in his direction. We are like, oh, come on, what are you talking about? He's coming back. And essentially he was. But I personally think, how all of this unfolded. Dubas obviously he wanted the power, he wanted autonomy, he wanted to make his own moves. Then wanted to go right up to the board and pretty much move out Shanahan, and there was turmoil even before that, right? With those two. So even maybe this worked out best for both sides, to be quite honest with you. I think with the rumors of them kind of infighting, he really didn't need that. So fast forward, listen, Brad Treliving. I can't really give an opinion either way because he hasn't really give the guy a chance. Everybody deserves at least a chance here. Reading kind of what the downfalls were in Calgary, people don't understand. He wasn't fired. He left. So it was in the same situation where, it's not like he was let go because of results. No, he left. And I think, people would want to speculate maybe because the Toronto job may have been open, one of the reasons why. But I also was reading, he really wanted to expand or create more of a sports science department in Calgary. but again, funds, resources probably wasn't allocated for that. Hey, guess what? Guess who has the biggest sports science department in the league right now? It's the Leafs, right? So now he's put into a situation where he has the resources, he has the money, he has the backing to maybe do what he wants to do. So those opportunities or those chances in Calgary weren't really afforded to him. Maybe he does something different now in Toronto, right? What I do like about him, he does build his teams from the back end. What many people don't know, he was a former professional player. He played a little bit in the AHL and the East Coast. He's a big boy. He's like 6'4", 2 and change.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, his outlook on the team is kind of what I've been saying for a while, that, you know, this defense needs to get rebuilt. They're just a bunch of good, decent players, but they have no substance to it. They have no, there's no, other than Luke Shen, you know, there's no guys who can punish you, but also be able to move the puck out of their zone. There's just a bunch of similar type guys. And I, for one, I think he's really going to make up this back end. And that's where I think he puts his stamp on this roster, at least to start the year.
A lot of the criticisms with Brad revolve around Tkachuk and Sam Bennett and Gaudreau and so on. And I'm like, well, in those circumstances, Gaudreau was going no matter what. Like, you weren't keeping him; he was going. And for lack of a better term, so was Tkachuk. Chucky was not staying. It's not like he went and goes, here, we have to trade these guys. See, there's a difference. Mm-hmm. When I pull a trigger on a trade and I say, you know, both Brendan Lang and Coach Frank, I got to trade these guys. That's not the circumstance. I mean, Bennett was a part of it, and he's playing lights out. And these things do happen where guys get a new environment and so on. Because whatever was being created in Calgary, it just, from a player personnel, it wasn't. And that's why when he pulls the Huberdeau deal and gets Kadri, he was being congratulated for saving something and getting something out of nothing, because it looked like it was going to be an absolute disaster, and he was able to organize. But as things fall, I mean, you can't foresee Huberdeau being just a waste of time. And Kadri, whatever you expected him to do, I don't know. But Markstrom, they counted so heavily on Markstrom being, you know, playing like Markstrom. He didn't. They have more overtime losses, the 1 point loser point, than anybody else in the league by like double. They had 18 or 19. It was ridiculous. So it's not like Treliving made bad trades for people that weren't as good, replace them with stuff that simply isn't accurate. And so I don't like that talk. And to your point, before the guy even starts, you know, can I just see what, like, we haven't hit a draft yet, but there are some major decisions. So you've got Austin Matthews in this contract going out there, all kinds of rumors, then the core four themselves, plus any other players you will or will not keep or come back. Or what is the puzzle that you see that if you had a little bit of a blue sky here and it's Coach Frank is now the general manager, what would you do? Because there's so much, as people are wanting to tear this thing down, and as well, I think you don't tear down a team that gets 111 points. That is a ridiculous premise. And some of those contracts you couldn't move anyway. But what is it that you'd be looking for that you think could happen for the Leafs in its best world?
Well, I think first and foremost, you mentioned it, right? Austin Matthews is your number one solution, and nothing gets done till that gets done. You know, that sends a message to the organization, to the fan base, that he is the backbone of our team. And I feel confident that he does get it done, just from, you know, what sources have been saying and kind of his approach to it. Yeah, apparently has a really good relationship with the Austin Matthews agent. If rumors are true and it's probably like a 5-year deal, hey, I'm okay with that. You know, you're getting a 5-year deal at a decent AAV. You're getting a guy who's probably going to be 31, 32 when that contract's done. That's kind of where you want a guy to kind of finish his contract. If I can be quite honest, not often does an 8-year deal work in this environment anymore. So, you know, that would probably be number one. Number two, you know, then you look at your other guys, like, you know, Nylander's probably going to be next. Do you want him going in with a 1-year deal? As much as I like the guy, you know, Dubas said yes to Matthews, Marner, and to Nylander. That has to stop now. You know, Shanahan said it's kind of had that approach where you gotta bring in a guy with some bite, play some hardball. Unfortunately, he might be the guy where it's like, hey, If this is not what it is, then I look to kind of move you for maybe that number one defenseman or a top six and a top pairing defenseman, something like that. Again, I don't want to trade the guy, but maybe that's the guy you look to move again to kind of round out your roster. Marner's not going to be moved, as much as I'm not his biggest fan. That's a deal where you're probably trading him at his lowest value, and you're not going to get the return. You're not going to win that deal. So what's the point? And if you listen to Treliving's press conference, he said having guys like the core four, which he hates the term, which I'm glad he said that, because I can't stand hearing that thing anymore. It's the Leafs. It's not the core four. But having four guys with that skill set in your lineup, the only way to really get those is you have to be really bad and draft them. You have them. So why do you want to trade them for? So what I would do for him, I look at the composition of these lines and say, I'll throw in a name like Milan Lucic. I'm not saying the Leafs should sign a guy like that, but can you imagine a guy like that with his skill set and what he brings to a team on the wing with Matthews and Marner or Tavares? That opens ice up for Marner, for Nylander, Matthews. You open up ice by finishing your checks, by giving these guys a room to operate. You hit Marner, there's nobody there to protect him. You go back to that hit on David Kampf from Radko Gudas. Gudas turned around waiting for somebody to respond. The Leafs went for a line change. He didn't respond. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about, the dynamic of the team where Treliving can really put his stamp on this roster, is to be like, you know what? I have four guys who are incredible hockey players who will score the goals for this team, but they don't have protection and they don't have the room to really operate and reach their full potential. That's where I see where, if I'm GM, I find those type of guys. I look at Tyler Bertuzzi as a possible guy like that, just something like that to give some real bite to this team and really have that across all four lines in my defense.
Is this, I know we got a couple of minutes here, is this the year where you don't have to overthink goaltending? Because in this town, off season is always about goalie talk. Is there goalie talk this summer?
Oh, Mike, that's a tough one, because as much as I really liked Ilya Samsonov last year, I don't think he's ever replicated 2 years like that. And you got Joe Wall coming, right? Which maybe he's already there. I like him, but maybe not yet. When you got guys like Connor Hellebuck out there, I think you have to at least inquire what it would take to get a guy like that. It's like, yeah, no, I don't need a perennial Vezina. I got two guys I think it can do it. You know what I mean? Some people will say the goaltending is like the running back position now. You can do it by committee. You can probably draft a decent one in the 5th round and not have to pay a lot for one. I'm not there yet. I'm still a guy, be like, if I can get a Vezina winner or a perennial top 5 goalie, Mike, you have the assets to do it, and this is your window. I think you got to pull that trigger, man.
That's interesting stuff. Wow, I could imagine Connor in Toronto. That is, and you are right. I do think it's a little running back ish, but if push comes to shove, if someone said, "Okay, but you got to make up your mind," I'm still going all world. I'm still going to take the guy that you can't beat. But it only works. It only works when he's got guys protecting him out front and guys who can get the puck out of their own end. Agreed. So you still can't get a one-off and just assume that it's going to change. And a lot of people think that, which is why sometimes those acquisitions of goaltending that don't work, they're like, well, yeah, but how come he was so great in Anaheim? Or how come he was so great in Tampa?
Exactly.
Well, because they had guys that played in front of them. That's why.
I'll leave you with this thought. GMs always do one of two things, maybe both. They always bring in their own coach and their own goalie. So I don't see Samsonov being the guy where Treliving is like, I feel really good about this. I honestly could see him making a move. And the best thing about this whole situation for me is Samsonov's a restricted free agent. If they don't like what he's going to get, he is a tradable asset and an asset that can probably bring you something back that you need for this team. So I'm keeping my eye on that situation.
Frank, awesome job as always. Thanks so much for joining us here this morning. Say hi to the growing family that looks bigger every day, and it looks like is Christian getting close to his draft year, because it's starting to feel that way looking at the pictures.
Yeah, I'm looking for agents right now. He's doing really well in the Pampers division of his league, so
yeah,
things are going great.
I'll talk to JP Barry at CEA. We'll see what we can do.
Perfect.
Take care, Frank.
All right, guys, take care.
That is Coach Frank joins you this morning. Always great when he can join us. Some great stuff here this morning. Something to think about too. Connor Hellebuck. A Leaf? Don't tell Bastl. That won't be good. That's not going to go over big.